Hi, Priscilla.
Hello, Dr. Chanelle.
I'm very excited to discuss the book Rosewater by Liv Little.
My name is Priscilla Agyeman. I'm the founder of Sadie Baddies, a virtual sanctuary designed for Black and multiracial people to come together in community and remove the stigma surrounding mental health. And I'm also the host of the Soft Life podcast, which shares weekly episodes about dealing with mental health and our lived experiences as Black and multiracial people. And we have amazing guests like Dr. Chanelle yourself, one of our favorite guests on the show. And yeah, really excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm so excited to be here with you. I love your podcast and I'm obsessed with Sadie Baddies, the community you've created. My name is Dr. Chanelle Ramsubick. I am an adult psychiatrist as well as a child and adolescent psychiatrist. And I'm currently working and living in Oakland, California. I am a second generation Trinidadian Canadian. And I've spent the majority of my career working in Black and Brown communities that have been historically underrepresented. I also use my social media at Dr. Chanelle MD to also discuss topics around reducing the stigma around mental health in our community, and also topics that are very specific to mental health within the Black community. And actually, my work on social media is what led me to develop a relationship with you, Priscilla.
Yes, and I love that. I love how organic our relationship has been and how we found each other through the internet. And I think it really speaks to the larger movement of collective healing that we're all on this journey on together.
Exactly.
So let's dive into Rosewater. And so for those of you who don't know, Rosewater by Liv Little right here is a coming of age novel. And the main character, her name is Elsie, and she's an aspiring poet in London. And Elsie is kind of going through this turmoil, this, I guess you can say, quarter life crisis, going through this journey and unlearning so many aspects about herself, her identity, and it's really about intergenerational healing and family dynamics, as well as opening up to the possibility of love. So love this book. I think that one of the things that struck me the most is how the family relationship and family dynamics affect us on such a deep level. What about you, Dr. Chanelle?
Agreed. I really loved how in this book, they did a really deep exploration of how family relationships can affect us. I think that in my work as a psychiatrist, I recognize that our primary relationships are our family. And so they have a huge impact on how we understand ourselves in the world, and also how we might interact with other people later in life outside of that family unit. And really, there's a passage where Elsie breaks down to her friend Maggie about her parents.
Yeah.
And how their absence and judgment has kind of closed her off to love.
Yeah. I think that passage in particular, really, it was jarring and it was so raw and honest. And I think more of us have had those conversations with people that we love or people that we trust, where we're trying to explain how we feel and our experiences with our family, how they've hurt us, how much we resent them. And I think that's what Elsie's struggling with in this moment. She's struggling with that resentment, that built up anger and frustration. And she is really yearning to get over this setback and this challenge in building a healthy relationship with her parents and her family. So I feel that. And I think despite where you or someone might be right now in their family dynamic, we've all had at some point a moment where we're like, at our wits' end with our family or our loved ones, and we just want them to see us and to realize how they've also contributed to some of the issues that we might have developed as an adult. Would love for you to speak more about that journey. I know we've talked about it on the podcast, how childhood development and our family dynamics have such a major impact, if not the most impact on our livelihood as adults. But I'd love for you to, touch on that and your knowledge.
Yeah, of course. I think that it was so interesting how Elsie figured it out. She recognized this pattern in her life, this pattern that she's been closed off to love. And then there's like this part of her that starts to do some discovery. Like, where does this come from? And what she concluded was there was probably some impact of her parents' dynamic or her family dynamic that led her to be closed off to love. And I think that the natural thing is to have some anger, because our parents or our families, we put them in this very small, this category that they're not supposed to hurt us because they're their family. They're supposed to be perfect. We put them on this, I think sometimes a pedestal, right? We have this anger towards them.
Yes.
One thing that you and I have talked about being second generation immigrants.
Yes.
A very common theme with our first generation immigrant parents is this scarcity mindset, that there are a finite amount of resources. We need to be successful. The alternative to that is so dire. You need to be successful. And this creates this scarcity mindset in their second generation children. And then as we are navigating life, we recognize that scarcity mindset is not helping us at all. In fact, we need to have the abundance mindset. And I think that when I started to recognize that in myself, I did get mad at my family as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've felt that same way.
I mean, I can't relate any more than what you shared. Like, I feel it so deeply. I think also there's an aspect of especially financial health and financial habits that we get passed down, from our parents and from our family members. And one thing that sticks out, and when you mention scarcity mindset, I naturally do start to think of financial health, but I think scarcity comes in a lot of different ways. Scarcity with love, scarcity with opportunities, and health, so many other things. But I think for a lot of us, especially those who come from Black and multiracial families, I am Ghanaian, and my parents were born and raised in Ghana. They moved here in the 90s and started a brand new life. My dad worked as an IT / system software engineer and worked his way through corporate essentially. And he learned so much. He had to assimilate to the culture of America. And my mom started her own business, 10 years being in America. And that provided us so many opportunities, but it does show you that what they had to deal with in their starting point is so different than mine. Like, my first job was right out of grad school, and I was working at a nonprofit. That was challenging for me because I was learning so much, but at the same time, it's nothing in comparison to my parents and what they had to go through. So we each had our own scarcity mindset. I think, growing up and being in your early 20s, by the time my mom was 27, she'd already had me. And when I was 27, I'm still trying to figure out life. So completely different realities, but I think
my parents were 23.
Oh my God. And that's like, so doesn't it feel so young? Like, in retrospect, how did you manage to do that and come to a new country and, I mean,
it shows they played by different rules than us.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think a lot of us, we've seen our parents struggle with, their finances, especially if they didn't have a head start or a lot of resources to get themselves as assimilated and comfortable as they could have been. And that creates that fear that we have with our finances and money and creating wealth for ourselves. And I feel like one of the biggest components of generational healing is also building generational wealth. And, how do we do that? How do we start? For me, I think community care is one of the most essential parts of that, versus just, okay, everyone get an LLC, start a business. That's great. But there's a lot of folks who are not going to come to that point. How do you think that we can incorporate community care so that it aligns with all of us being able to build generational wealth and health for our families down the line.
Yeah. And I think that one huge component of that is your mindset. And scarcity mindset does not allow you to come together in community, because one of the bases of scarcity mindset is the fact that resources are finite and that not everybody can grow and win together. And I think that this scarcity mindset is a trauma response that our parents had being immigrants to the country and having that type of responsibility to provide for the family and also their children. And you know what I'm recognizing? Liv Little is actually Jamaican and Lebanese descent in South London.
Yes.
And I think that this scarcity mindset trauma is so common amongst us.
Absolutely.
Black children of the diaspora.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a part of the healing process of healing that scarcity mindset is recognizing that our parents are human and they needed to do things to survive. And what they needed to survive is not what we need to survive. And so we can live in that, like Elsie was doing. It is okay to be angry that certain family dynamics have affected you now, but you have the responsibility, I think, to also heal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the saying, you know, your trauma is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. And I think when we hear that, sometimes we can feel, well, this isn't my fault. I shouldn't have to do all of this work myself. And it's true. Healing's not supposed to be done alone. It's supposed to be done in community. It's supposed to be done collectively. So I think that, you know, reading Rosewater and even the first chapter with Elsie getting evicted and her being terrified and trying to remember some of those like self-healing, self-care practices with taking deep breaths. And, you know, there's a quote or a passage in it that says, in that moment, she's trying to call on all of these self-care tools or these healing modalities, and she's not able to because she's so confronted with this fear of being evicted. You know, and I think that's the reality for a lot of people, is that sometimes in the moment, you may not be able to remember, okay, what do I need to do in this moment? What do I need to do so that I can get myself out of this situation? But I think her eventually leaving and living with her best friend, Juliet, I think really shows the importance of having those relationships. And that is community care in itself, you know, being able and willing to give someone a safe space while they unpack, while they are able to do that. And then if that's in your capacity to, of course, you know, there's other ways that you can help and contribute to someone having a safe space, whether it's literally, figuratively, you know, physically. So I think it really speaks to a lot of our internal struggles with trying to find a space to unpack our trauma, our childhood moments that kind of resurface at the most inconvenient times.
Yes, exactly. Right. Like when you're trying to find love.
Exactly.
I think that love is such a complicated, feeling, such a complicated thing, because where do you don't, that's where you look to really understand love. Is your primary relationship, is your family. And usually love is extremely complicated within families.
Yeah.
You know, also what you were saying about in the first chapter, when she gets, you know, with that possibility of being evicted, I remember this concept that Black men get locked up and Black women get locked out. And so it's this idea that there are all these, like the impact of racism is constantly breaking up the Black community in all these different ways. And building community within us is actually an act of resistance, because laws are trying to break up our community.
Yeah.
And so I love that within the first chapter, you already see that there is Elsie who is, she can't use any of her coping skills because coping skills are really supposed to be used when things are mild, or coping skills are supposed to be really used to keep you out of going into, a crisis mode. But when you're in crisis, deep breathing, it's really hard for that to work, particularly the crisis of having unstable housing.
Yeah.
You can't breath work your way out of being on the street.
Yes.
And these are the real problems that we face because of racism, sexism, homophobia. And so that's why community is literally an act of resistance to all of those oppressive structures. And so I love that in this book, we already get straight into it. It brings people like you and I, making us feel like the things that we deal with are important.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that is so true. I think, looking at it from a framework of not only this is something that's just happening to Elsie, this is just an isolated incident. This is something that happens every single day in London, in New York, in LA. Exactly, everywhere, right? So I really appreciate you shedding light on that and highlighting that aspect of this being a perpetual systemic issue that's not just one person missing rent for a month or two. This is a collective issue where this is breaking up a family, this is breaking up a home. And, to Elsie, this was one of the first places that started to feel like home. And, losing that sense of home, I think it's not ironic that she's losing her physical home, but also trying to find her way back to her familial home as well. Mm-hmm. So I definitely encourage anyone to check out this book. It is such a good read.
It's amazing.
It's really, really, really such a beautiful, novel of intergenerational healing, love, family. And let's share where people can find us, Dr. Chanelle.
I think we definitely should. So you can find me on my social media page called Dr. Chanelle MD on Instagram. You can message me. I am very responsive and would love to continue this conversation through my social media channels as well.
Yes, definitely give her a follow. She is your favorite psychiatrist, the coolest psychiatrist I've ever seen, truly. And yes, you're going to love going on your journey because you're also sharing like parts of your journey as well and like your learnings, which I think is just so beautiful and refreshing. And I think, sometimes in the medical field, it can feel very like stoic or it can feel very
sterile.
Yes, exactly. But I think you're the opposite of that while still providing so much information and resources. You always share resources, which I love and appreciate so much. And you can find me, Priscilla O. Agyeman, on my personal Instagram, priscilla.o.agyeman, or also, of course, follow Sadie Baddies, Sadie_Baddies. Yes. On all platforms, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter. We exist on all of the social media platforms, as well as the Soft Life Pod, which you can follow on Instagram. And of course, subscribe on Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. So thank you so much for tuning in.
This was so great. I'm so happy that we got to speak on one of our favorite topics and that it was covered in this amazing book by Liv Little.
Yes, definitely check it out.